I'm Brad Teare, and this is my new studio. As you can see, it's still not done. We're taking our time and getting things done right. But this is the first time I've filmed in my new studio. So I wanted to go over a few of the palette knives that I've been using lately. I know I've mentioned these a few times on my blog, and so I just wanted to kind of do an overview. Here's a set of the palette knives that I have. Now this isn't to say I use every knife on every single painting, but this is the workhorse of most of my paintings. I start off with this one, and the reason I like this is you can load up a ton of paint in a very short little span. Like a longer palette knife, like this one, for example, you can load that up and you can, lay on a lot of color off of this edge. But this one just is, you can just load it up with a nice chunky stroke and just lay it down, and it works really great. So some of these you have to just kind of get in and try them out. And I have a link on my blog for this one, and I also have a link, well, I'll have a link to all of these. Now this is really great. One thing that it might not be obvious is this edge here. You can load that up with paint and daub it on, sideways like this, and that's really a great stroke. But this stroke is also a great stroke. This is really good for clouds. So this is my second most favorite. So I can paint a 20 by 20 painting with these two palette knives, and I have no problem at all. A variation of this one, in fact, the reason I was intrigued with this kind of ginkgo leaf shaped palette knife was because I bought this knife, and this is nice too. And this is really good for blending, especially this really broad edge here. It's about the same, so it's really good for blending. But sometimes you want to have that rounded tip. So remember that each palette knife that you use has different uses. Now this is another one. Now this is great for getting paint out of paint jars, but it's also like an eraser. So when I make a mistake, I just scrape the paint off with this and squish it back on my palette, and either reuse it, or if it's gone too gray, check it. But think of this spatula type as an eraser. It's quite stiff, so you can really scrape and essentially get all the paint off. Now here's a set of knives I just got from a Japanese maker, and these are very stiff, and I'll have a link on these. So these came in a set. I think there was like maybe 12 palette knives. Now I haven't found a use for all of them as yet, but this one's really nice. You can load up a lot of color on the end here and then pull it off and get that really nice kind of a soft edge with that rounded piece there. Now there's a whole category of knives that have a serrated edge, like this one here. And what that does is sort of impart a more brush-like quality to the stroke. So, I don't use this a lot, but I use this for breaking up edges. Like if there was an edge along here, I'll just, kind of squish that along there. Now, generally speaking, I always clean the palette knife off with a tissue before I reapply paint. Okay, this one's kind of a variation of that other one, except this one has a stiffer blade. I don't really love this one that much because of the stiffness. I like the more kind of the suppleness of that. But you'll notice that this has a more flared or a broader shoulder, and that can be handy sometimes. Now this one is handy for making fence posts or tree. You just load up a lot of paint onto here, and then you pull that off in a long stroke for a branch, or like a straight stroke for maybe some some detail on a barn or something like that. So that can be very handy, and that has just it's just a flat end. There's no serration there. Now this one's another one. Typically use, this is what I kind of call my spatula knives. And this is kind of two variations of the same thing. You can see they have a round tip, and you can just load up a ton of paint on here. This is good for a sky that you want to have just very flat texture, not a lot of brush strokes or palette knife strokes. And this is the same thing except just on a smaller scale. So, I'll load this up with a lot of paint and then just pull the paint off of the palette knife like that. Or this one, like across the sky. So very nice. These are both. This is kind of maybe you might say my third workhorse. It's one I really like. Here's one that I got. Now this one has a rounded end and it's serrated, and that's very brush-like. So, and again, very, very stiff. And I use that for, breaking up edges. And here's another one. And like I say, a lot of these you have to get in and experiment with to, see how they really work. But this one has a kind of a curved edge. So you could get a very soft blending with that. Clean it off, blend it, clean it off, blend it again. So this would be for very, very subtle shading. Now here's a knife. Now there's one other knife I have that I don't have with me today. It's in my other studio. But this one's useful. You can load this up, and if you've watched any of my videos on loading the brush, I load a palette knife exactly the way I load a brush. I would scrape up paint with one other palette knife, and then I would squish it on there, pick up another color, squish it on like that. So you get a bunch of different colors on here, and then you can pull those colors off in a kind of a blended effect. But if you load this whole leaf here of the knife and then pull it like this, you can get really nice brush strokes. Now this will start out softer. This blunter one will give a nice square edge. That's really good for a fence post or something. This would be good for like a leaf or maybe a branch that starts out small. You just apply it very softly, and then use more of the paint as you pull it across. So that's good. And I have a variety of, now depending on the size of the canvas, you might just want to upscale the size of your knife. You can see this is, it's similar. It's not quite as blunt. That blunt tip is one thing I really love about this short one, because that just lets you deposit a lot of paint really fast. A smaller tip, you can deposit a lot, this way, on the side, but the tip will deposit less. So this will make more of a kind of a linear mark. Okay, and then now these are, I use these a lot less, but I have them, so I thought I'd just show them. And if you know what these smaller, stiffer brush or palette knives are for, let me know. I'm assuming it's just for making kind of little, like pointillistic dabs and that sort of thing, and I don't really use that technique a lot. Now here's one of the stranger brushes. Palette knives. I keep calling these brushes. And the reason I keep calling them brushes is basically, a brush is a tool, a palette knife is a tool. It's just a way to get paint onto your canvas. But I haven't really figured out what this one's used for. But I want to keep it in my satchel, just because, I want to see what if I'm ever inspired to use it on something. You can see it has a different frequency of bumps on each side, so that might be interesting. I don't know. Just have to play around with it. Now here's a flat-nosed palette knife, and you can see it has very blunt serration on the top, so that would give a very slightly, serrated edge. And I don't know if that's just worn down like that. I'm not quite sure, but. And here's another thing. This is, I keep this in the studio. I don't use this in the field a lot, but this is a canvas scraper, and I do use it to scrape canvases, or I used to. But this is very useful to make marks. And as you know, I use a red underpainting. So if you want to pull back some of those red marks, you can just scratch into your paint surface with this, and it's very, very handy. So that is basically the palette knife setup that I'm currently using. And I will talk a little bit more about each one of these, well, especially the main ones I use, I will use, I'll write a paragraph or two about each one of these on my blog, bradteare.blogspot.com, and I'll have links as well.